Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're gonna be reviewing the album Dhorimviskha by the band Koenjihyakkei.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So here's an interesting fact for all of you. Apparently so far on this series I reviewed like 60 to 70 albums which were never reviewed on YouTube ever. Now today I found out something pretty concerning apparently. Apparently no one beside me has ever reviewed any Koenjihyakkei album on YouTube. So while I'm doing a big service apparently to this band 4 times over, I'm just amazed by the fact that this band hasn't really gotten its well-deserved representation over on this platform. So if any music reviewers are watching this video, you probably should get around to reviewing something of theirs because honestly, a lot more people should get to know them. But yeah, anyways, here are some of my favorite bits from this album. For any Koenjihyakkei fans watching this video, I have some good news for you. Despite there only being 19 more days until the end of 365 Days of Prog, we somehow still have yet another Koenjihyakkei album to review, and that will happen in only a 3 days time, because yes, then we will be reviewing Koenjihyakkei's third studio album called Nivraim. But with that being said, I will shut my bladdermouth about speaking of this album, because for now we are reviewing Koenjihyakkei's 2018's album and currently their last album in their studio discography called Dhorimviskha. But for anyone who is unaware or doesn't really know this band quite well, they actually started releasing albums all the way back in 1994 with their debut album, and then they continued on soldiering on and releasing an album every 3 or 4 years until their 4th studio album Koenjihyakkei in the year of 2005. But afterwards they didn't really get around to releasing yet another studio album, and they were still performing, but in 2010 the band has just sort of disbanded. Now it is quite a main point of disagreements whether Koenjihyakkei actually disbanded or just went on a hiatus, but I guess what it actually means is that the band were just inactive for a good amount of time. And as time just passed on from 2005 since they released their last studio album, and from 2010 since they gave their last live show, people were starting to believe that, well, Koenjihyakkei probably just moved on and were a thing of the past. So I can't start and even fathom to myself how everyone felt when suddenly in the summer of 2018 the band came out with their 5th studio album. And this album, much like most that predated it, also has a very odd name, which as far as I'm concerned doesn't have a real meaning, but is supposedly taken from the fictional language of Korean. And this one is called Dhorimviskha. And well, despite it being about 13 years since releasing an album, the band has somewhat been able to consistently have the same cast of members on here. So of course the main heart and soul of Koenji is to be found on here, and that's of course no other than Yoshida Tetsuya playing the drums and of course doing the vocals. And alongside him of course we also have the female vocalist that has been with the band for a really long while now, and that's of course no other than Yamamoto Kyoko, which she is also apparently known as by this point, which is a really odd name. One of the first changes that we do see on here is the replacement of the old Koenji keyboardist being Kanazawa Miyako by a new one called Kabuki Tako. Kamori Kaiko and Sakamoto Kengo are of course also here, and they play their respective instruments being the wind and the bass. And while on the last album by Koenji being Ankar Shispa, we saw them completely abstaining from using any sorts of guitars, this one actually saw the arrival of a sixth player which plays the guitar, being Koganemaru Kai playing the electric guitar, and of course the added benefit of vocals. Now right from the get-go, these slight changes to the band's lineup can definitely be felt in the overall sound of this one. Yes, it is very keyboard oriented as well as very much piano oriented as well, and we also get guitar solos on here, and quite a few of them, which honestly in the context of Koenjihyakkei sound quite alien. But on a more broader point, I don't think that these two instruments just make the entire difference on this album. I think that the change of mind to be found on here is definitely shown. Yes, you could not expect a band after 13 years of a hiatus to just be the same as they were in the past, and well, it definitely shows on here. And while in the past you would say that there was a bunch of madness to be found in their songs, now I do believe that we can find method in the madness over here, and quite a bit of it actually. Now this album opens up with the first of 7 tracks, which I will completely butcher their names one after the other, and this first one is called Vlezmetrive. I don't know. And this one features something very interesting that to me at least resembled a lot the sound of the Canterbury scene, and what I mean by that is that it's basically high energized music, of course, with the saxophone that hails supreme on this album but always stays slightly in the background of everything, and it's just a big piece made out of small ideas all put together not so homogeneously. Now what I immediately found very surprising about Vlezmetrive is the fact that it was pretty bright and upbeat and cheery in many ways, and well, what I might not entirely remember how Ankar Shispa sounded throughout its entirety, I can say that it wasn't as happy as this song was, and especially comparing it to the last entry that I listened to by Koenjihyakkei on the list, being their second album Viva Koenji. That one was really dark and ominous and downright scary and frightening, so listening to something by them which is generally just more happy, cheery, bright and all that is very much surprising for me. Now in this review I will not be going over each and every track on this album, but I do feel like I just have to speak about the following track on this one as well, and this one is called Levhorm, and the thing is, this one is very jazz oriented. Now you might be thinking to yourself, you know what, Zool started off, with Christian Vander basically taking a lot of inspirations from jazz, and well, you might be correct with that, but the thing is, the process in which Zool had gone in like 50 years is so lengthy, and it has seen so many things that we kind of just sometimes forget what the origins of this genre are. And well, with this track in particular, you suddenly are plopped right back and into this old, club playing jazz somewhere back in the past. And while the main vocalist sings in a very alien tongue, it still feels very much jazzy. And when I speak of the main vocalist, of course I'm speaking about Yamamoto Kyoko. She actually has a solo on here, not everyone just, choiring and singing everything all together, but she sounds like she's just a singer at a jazz club playing in the middle of the night to the little amount of people that would hear what she sings, and honestly, It's beautiful. It was breathtaking hearing it come from a band like this. But the thing is, despite these songs that I just detailed to you being good songs, as I kept on listening to this album, it quickly became apparent to me that I had two issues with it. The first one, well, might it be very interesting for Koenjihyakkei to go into this chill mood and not be too mad all the time. I do feel like it makes them lose some of their some of their speciality. And that was one thing, and the second thing is, well, this album just kind of feels stretched out. You can definitely tell that these guys were trying to get to the limitations of CD when doing this one, and thus it feels like every single track on this entire album is stretched out to some extent, even the ones that I personally enjoy. But after a quick rendezvous with this album, we of course get to the second to last song on this album, called Palbeth Tisilak. Yeah, what are these names? And well, this is my favorite track from the album. I do feel like it takes a lot of inspirations from jazz fusion. It starts off very calmly, very nicely, and then of course moves on to the entire madness section, and I just loved it a bit. And yes, while it might be a bit overstretched, I think it is the least overstretched out of the entirety of this album, and thus I really liked it. And in true Naomi fashion, of course, this is the least popular track as seen on the Spotify data, and of course it just had to be my favorite. And of course we get to the final track of the album, being its title track, Dhorimviskha. And well, this one also starts really promising, but unfortunately it is quite long, and it does make you feel like you're going out of your way to listen to it, while it's not really as captivating as it could have been. But if there's two things that I will remember about this song, is that firstly there's like this really interesting piece of section in the middle, which the song feels like it's deconstructing itself. It's just falling apart, and that aesthetic is really interesting, and I have no idea how they were able to recreate that on stage. And the second thing, this song sounds experimental, and saying anything about experimentalism and Koenjihyakkei sounds, you know, almost coincidental. How can these guys not be experimental? And well, they are, but they sounded even more experimental in comparison to themselves on this one, and that's definitely not something I'd say lightly. But yeah, overall, when I look at this album, I am really happy. I don't think that this is a perfect album in any way, but it's definitely a right direction that they were taking on here with their music, trying to change their pace but still remaining pretty much consistent with their overall sound, and I like that quite a bit. And I'm really looking forward for them to release yet another album, because if they could have done so after 13 whole years, I am very much hopeful that they will do it again, hopefully sooner than later. So this album is just beautiful. It's absolutely marvelous, and the thing that I like about it the most is how it just hinders the Japanese culture from which Koenji had risen. And well, you might have not noticed this, but yes, this album cover right next to me, it has been altered, it has been tampered with, and by yours truly actually. Yes, you see this album cover, as you can find it anywhere online, is actually not in an entirely, you know, square format, but instead it's like this a bit stretched out rectangle. And I was like, okay, I can just, you know, crop out two sides of it, make it a square, but the thing is it cropped out the text as well, so I did some Photoshop magic and I just realigned the text to make it look like this. So technically it's not the exact cover, but honestly I changed so little of it that it doesn't really matter. But the thing is, I can't even start talking about the beauty of this cover like this when you don't know the full picture. And well, when I say the full picture, I do mean the full picture, because you can unfold this cover and see that it actually makes for a 3-panel drawing. Just look at this. Just take a moment and look at this. I'm gonna keep it on the screen for longer just so you can take more looks at this one. This to me feels like the Roger Dean equivalent in Japan. Yes, it is just this big landscape that's going around in very mystical forms, but in another sense it looks like it might also be realistic, and it tells a bunch of stories in it, but not in an in-your-face sort of mentality, but instead just doing so ever so lightly. You know, if you're interested you can look at the stories, and if you're not, you don't really have to. And of course you have the big sort of Fukushima volcano in the middle, which to me, when I look at it, I just kind of associate associate the name Dhorimviskha with the mountain. I think that that's the name of the mountain. I don't know if that's the case, but that's what I love about this cover and covers in general. They make you think about them, and when they do so, you know that they've done things right. And when it comes down to this cover, it's definitely the best one by Koenjihyakkei thus far. The best looking cover. I don't think that they can ever top it, but you know what? I'm waiting to see if they can. So all in all, this is the album that I will remember as the one that tried and sort of failed to reinvent Koenjihyakkei, but as it comes down to it, these guys are making a step in the right direction, and I'm really looking forward to see what they do in the future. But for now, this album is gonna receive a rating of 7 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to National Health by National Health. Yes, I know, I am also very excited. I of course want to thank my lovely supporters over on Patreon, so thank you so much to Clay Wall, Arist of Kings, and Lindsay Haycox. You guys are just the best. And if any of you want to support me over on Patreon, you can find the link down in the description or in my About page. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.